Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We're just going to give it another minute or so until the rest of the group is able to join us today. So if you could just introduce yourself in the chat in the meantime, give us your name, where you're joining from, and what grades and or subjects you teach this year. Okay, so it is 2 minutes after. I'm just going to get started over here. Welcome to Getting Started with SpacesEDU, your first class. Just a couple things here before we get started. We'll be using the chat button to answer discussion questions. And for questions, please use the Q&A button on the Zoom screen. And as always, today's session will be recorded and you will get a copy of the recording after the session today. If you've just joined us, please introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know your name, where you're joining from, and what grades and or subjects you're teaching this year. So a little bit about myself before we get started. My name is Tatiana. I am the Education, Training, and Engagement Specialist here at SpacesEDU, which just means that I help teachers like yourselves understand how to use the platform and help them identify features that are best fit for them based on their teaching goals and practices. So what is SpacesEDU? So SpacesEDU is a digital portfolio and proficiency-based assessment platform built to showcase student growth. Here, we're taking a look at how dynamic and organized your class can look like on SpacesEDU. And of course, your learning environments will look different as it will largely depend on your district and or your school's objectives, sometimes even your teaching practices. But this is just a sneak peek. If you haven't created an account yet, I would highly recommend doing that after the webinar today, and you can start exploring all the features that we will be going through as a group. Now, our main focus today is to equip you with the essential skills and knowledge needed to successfully implement Spaces EDU in your classrooms for digital documentation. However, I do want to highlight that you also have access to powerful proficiency-based assessment tools at your fingertips, which you are free to explore in our more advanced webinars or even in your own time after today's session if you're feeling adventurous. I'll be including some awesome resources in my follow-up email, which include video tutorials, help center articles, and any integration ideas as well that will come into your inbox shortly after today. And you can explore and deepen your learning that way. One thing's for sure, though, when you walk away today, you will know how to personalize learning, document and communicate student growth, and configure your class to collect assessment data. Let's just dive right into it. I'm going to go ahead and show you my teacher account. So when you're logged in for the first time in your SpacesEDU account, you'll be taken to your class's dashboard. If you have multiple classes like myself, you would see that right away. Sometimes your district or school may be opting for class rostering, which just means that they've automatically loaded your classes for you and eliminates a lot of work on your on your end, so you don't have to manually create those classes. However, if that's not the case for your district, you would just simply click the plus add class button on the bottom right to manually create your class. I would actually recommend creating a test class regardless if you're on rostering or not. That way you can still have a sandbox environment and make any changes, just test out anything that you want in that dedicated test class. We're going into this class right here to get started. I'm brought directly to my feed as soon as I get into my class, which is everything that's happening in my SpacesEDU class across all my learning environments. Teachers love the feed because they can quickly access all the content that lives in their class. They can filter by student, and then they can engage with the content through emojis. They can even use the comments section to provide constructive feedback and really dive deeper into that descriptive feedback as well, because there are other options other than text-based comments. Over here, as you can see, you can quickly record yourself using the audio feature. You can record a video and attach any other resources that you think are pertinent to your feedback. Our starting point today will be the Spaces tab up here to set up our learning environments. So let's head into that, actually. I already have a few spaces set up, so quite a few learning environments, and those are synonymous. Spaces or learning environments, and that is actually our namesake feature, hence SpacesEDU. When you log in for the first time, you're only going to have your class space, which is this one right here, and it's automatically created for you when you create a class. So what's a class space? Let's take a look. We'll just click on that space card right here to take us to our class space. And the class space is a collaborative and interactive environment. In here, my students can see each other's work. They can see what I'm posting as well. I can also control what they can see in the class space and manage the level of interactivity if I so choose. Now, because it is a collaborative space, the class space is excellent for announcements, class-wide discussions, and just for students to share their work with their peers. And in terms of how you can manipulate the visibility settings, that can easily be adjusted if directly in the space or even from your spaces section here by clicking on the three dots on a space card and then going to edit space settings. For the class space, there are 3 tiers of access. So of course, there's hidden. So some teachers like to hide the class space and they use other types of learning environments, which I'll explain in a little bit. So you have that option if you don't think you're going to use the class space with your students, sorry. You can also make it visible, and that simply limits the level of access or the number of actions your students can take in the class space. Whereas active simply means you give full control to your students to post, to view each other's posts and comments. They can comment on each other's posts as well, and they can view the comments that you make yourself on all posts across the class space. As for the family access, you only have 2 levels here. You can hide the class space from families, or you can make it visible and also choose to give them access to the comments section. And in addition to the class space, you can have more learning environments like individual spaces. So this one as an example, which teachers tend to love using specifically for student portfolios. And the reason for that is because it is a one-to-one type of learning environment. It's private between you and the individual student. and of course, optionally, any family members that are tied to that specific student. So I have a portfolio space that I've created here. I can go into to show you what an individual space would look like. So on the top here, we have a description of the space where you could put any guidelines, just provide context in general for your students and even for families. Sometimes it's kind of nice because it lives at the very top of the space. People can easily access that information as soon as they get into that learning environment. So over here, I have additional resources I've attached here. There's a guide to our blog post on digital portfolios and how families can be involved. And over here, I've also linked it to the curriculum. I work a lot with BC teachers, so here I've just simply put the BC curriculum, but wherever you're joining us from, it looks like it's from Alberta. You could add, let's say, a link to the Ministry of Education in Alberta and for more information there. Then if we scroll down, we can start seeing all the posts that are in here, learning artifacts in particular. We've got a few photos from students here of their work. We even have videos, text. So there are various, medias that you can attach to a post, up to 10 media files actually. And as you can see here, I did mention that we do have assessment tools at your disposal, and one of them being curriculum tags, where you can establish those connections between learning artifacts and any classroom activity with the curriculum, whether that's curricular or non-curricular objectives, as shown here. On the left-hand side, we have our list of students for which we've created a portfolio space, and we can sort through by student as well. And again, just to reiterate, these students cannot see each other's individual space, each other's portfolio. That remains private. There is also one additional learning environment I wanted to touch on here, which is the group space. It's another type of collaborative learning environment you can create. You can randomly or manually assign students to groups, and only group members can see and interact with the content in their respective group space. Like this one, for example, I have two groups and they cannot see each other's content again, but it is still collaborative in nature because we have multiple students grouped together. As for individual spaces, a couple ideas come to mind besides portfolios. You could use them for differentiating learning. If you have specific students on IEPs, for example, you could create one individual space for that purpose. For goal setting, that could be another great space as well. Some teachers love it for student-led conferences, for projects or specific units, and sometimes even subjects. So there are endless possibilities, and that is the beauty of it. You can decide how many types of spaces you have in your class, that you can have an unlimited amount. But I do recommend starting off slow, maybe with just a class space and one additional individual space, perhaps for digital documentation. So having just that one maybe portfolio space to begin with. And then you can explore other types of spaces for various options, etc. All right, so now that you have a sense of what types of spaces you can create, start to think about how these learning environments can facilitate and organize your teaching. And I can show you how to create an additional space. So once you're ready to go ahead and do that, you'll know exactly what to do. So from the Spaces tab, we're going to click the plus create button on the bottom right corner here, where we'll then be prompted to select the type of space. For the purpose of today's webinar, I'm going to show you how to create an individual space for all your students. So that is a pro tip. You can include all students in one shot to create the same type of space for your whole class, basically. So we'll hit next over here. And by default, actually, the system will select all your students and even include future students, which is awesome because this means that any students that join your class, like a transfer student, for example, they will have the same type of setup as their classmates, which also means less work on your end. Then we'll click next. So over here, we have to customize a couple fields. We can include a space card photo if we want. So over here, you can have a little thumbnail. Usually it should be representative of what the space will be used for. So let me upload something in here. We're going to create a goal setting space, just as an example here. And we're going to name it My Goals. And then I can include a description here briefly. Right. And then I'll be prompted to select a color. I can select any color here. And then I can also add up to 10 media files. For example, I could record a video introduction to the space. I can just basically attach any relevant resources that I so wish in this portion here. And then I'm going to click Save to continue. One thing to note, by default, your individual and group spaces are hidden until you are ready to make them visible. So that gives you ample time to organize your spaces EDU class setup, which is perfect for the beginning of the year. So for next year, even before the first day of class, you can start organizing your setup right away. But for my case, I'm ready to review these settings to make it active for my students and also visible to parents here. And why not give them access to the comment section as well? We'll hit save to make that go live. So now this is visible not only in my spaces tab right here, this additional space, but it is also now accessible through my students and their families' accounts as well. Speaking of which, I'm going to show you what this looks like on a student account. Again, this is the classes dashboard for a student account. Looks very similar to a teacher account here. And we'll dive right into this specific class. And as you can see, it looks pretty identical to what my view looks like as a teacher. I have the feed. I can see all my classmates' work here across the class space, across all other types of spaces. I can also see my own posts as well. And then if I go into the Spaces tab, I can see the learning environments that I have access to. And basically, you can think of these additional learning environments as folders. And one of them is the goals, my goals individual space that I just created. And now as a student, I can go ahead and start posting to the space, and I would click this plus create button to do so. I'm going to pause here in case there are any questions about the 3 different space types and their respective visibility settings. Please let me know in the Q&A section if you have any questions about those 2 elements. And while you're at it, feel free to also share in the chat how you see yourself using the class space. And if you have an idea already for an individual space, please let me know. Would love to hear what type of ideas are coming to mind here for your learning environments. But to summarize, you have 3 types of spaces, and you can decide how interactive and accessible you want these spaces to be. So the class space, great for collaboration and for class-wide discussions, announcements, really sharing what's happening day to day. Some love it for giving us just a window into the classroom to, especially to families, right? And on the other hand, we have the individual space, which is more private, and it's that one-on-one type of learning environment that you can still give access to families, but again, it just creates a safe place for your students to receive and apply your feedback to their work, and also document their progress and process as well. I am not seeing any questions coming through, so I'm going to take that as a sign that we can continue and move forward with our next step here. So let's go back to the feed because I do want to show you how to load curriculum tags to your account in preparation for assessment. We're not diving into the assessment tools today, like I mentioned. However, this step is crucial to start assessing on SpacesEDU if that is eventually what you're intending to use the platform for. So to begin doing any sort of assessing on SpacesEDU and leveraging and making those curriculum connections, we have to load curriculum tag sets. No, you do not have to enter them manually. You just have to select them from our database, which is awesome. So to do this, you can either go to your account settings or you could do it from your feed by clicking the Manage Tag Sets button on the bottom right over here. And then you'll have to click on Add Curriculum Tag Sets to search for your curriculum tags. So you can either do this by province over here, sometimes even by school if your school has personalized tag sets. For province, we can go to Alberta as an example. And if we go to, let's say, English language arts, we can load grade 5 curriculum tags here. So as you can see, it's very comprehensive. This is tied to the curriculum, of course. So we can click Add Set to add this information to our account. So you can keep repeating the same step or steps essentially to load your curriculum tag sets. So as you can see, I have multiple ones here. And if you're looking for non-curricular tag sets as well, so just simply a way for you to organize the content across SpacesEDU, we have broader tag sets that our team has created. So if I go back here into the curriculum tag sets button, I can search for SpacesEDU. And then I have artifact type as an example. So these are ways for me to organize my spaces. If, for example, if there's a post pertaining to a goal, I could tag it with goal. If it's a reflection, I have that as an option as well. So you could add these to your account. Another great one that I do recommend is time frame. You can differentiate across terms, semesters, or trimesters, even by unit over here. So you could add this to your class. And another great one could quickly show you is grades. So if you have a split class, especially on SpacesEDU, this would be a great way for you to differentiate between students across different grades. And again, adding that layer of organization to your class here. All right, so that pretty much sums up the curriculum tag set process. And oops. Sorry, this is freezing up on me. Okay, no problem. So once you have pretty much configured your learning environments, right, creating those additional spaces, and also loading your curriculum tag sets to organize the content that will eventually live in your class. The next step would involve potentially inviting people to your class if your district or your school has not set up class rostering for you. So this you would do through the People tab here. And to invite students, you can click on Invite Students right here. And you would be able to see either a class code or even a link, sometimes depending on whether or not you're on single sign-on. So then your students could enter this class code, or they could sign up through the link that you provide, and then they can be automatically associated with your class. If you have a Google Classroom, you can also invite them through Google Classroom as well. As for families, if you wanted to add family members or to your class, give them visibility into their students' learning journey, you could do so through the family section here by entering their email address per student. And you can have up to 5 family members per student as well. As for co-teachers, let's say you have support teachers that you want to give visibility into your SpacesEDU class, or even any administrators, that is totally possible through the Teachers tab here. And then if you click on Invite Teachers, you can enter their email addresses one by one. And when they're linked to your class, they are also able to create content. They can have their own type of space if they need, for if they're responsible for specific students. They could create individual spaces for that purpose too. So that is the whole invitation process. And finally, before we wrap things up, I wanted to show you how you would start engaging your class and also engaging families on SpacesEDU, and that would be through posts. So to create a post, you could either do it from the feed or by going directly into the respective space. But we're going to do this from the feed, and we'll click the plus create button right here and then go to post. And then over here, we can start customizing some of these fields. We could add a photo or any media file here available. So if this is going to be an introduction to SpacesEDU, you could introduce yourself, maybe putting your photo here as an example. Okay, I cannot find my photo, so I'm just going to go ahead and use any photo that I can find here. Just going to add this, and then we can give it a title. Welcome to SpacesEDU. And then we can ask students to introduce themselves in the comments section. tell me a fun fact about you in the comments section. Right. And then we can optionally add curriculum tags to our posts. So again, making that curriculum connection right off the bat if we wanted to. I can show you what that looks like over here. If I click on the button, I could tag it with term 1 as an example, and then click the check mark, continue with next. Next, we have to select the space where we want to publish this content. Since this is meant to engage the whole class in discussion, we're aiming for the class space here for that collaboration. And then we'll hit next to continue. And I will select over here the type of post that I'm choosing to create. There are 2 types here at your disposal. As a teacher, you have more options for posts than the student. So shared posts basically creates one post, one identical post for all the students that you select to be, or all the students that you target in a post. So it would be great for announcements or just to showcase what's happening in the classroom, or for any discussion questions. You would want to opt for a shared post because all the comments will be shared in one post. Whereas if you were hoping to assess the students individually, you would opt for the template posts. When you select template posts, that allows you to create separate copies of the same post for each student, and then later on customize that content. You could apply individual assessments, even like thinking of proficiency levels. That's another option we have on our platform. You could tag it with specific curriculum tags if you wanted to, or add additional media on a student-to-student basis. So for the purpose of today's webinar, we are just going with a shared post and then selecting all students, and why not include all future students as well, so they have a history of what's happening or what happened in the classroom here. Then we will go ahead and post this. Here we go. So this is now live. We have my media that I've attached here. I have my title and description, and also the non-curricular tag that I used for the post. A couple elements here to take note of when it comes to posts. You will see who the author is, of course, the date and timestamp. And this little guy right here, the sticker, it refers to the space where you publish this content. So for me, this would be my class space. And if we scroll down, we can see other types of stickers as well. This is the portfolio space, which is the individual space, this one as well. So something to be mindful of. And a quick trick here, if you wanted to go into that space, you could simply click on the sticker and it would take you right there. So that pretty much wraps up the digital documentation portion of SpacesEDU. So really making sure here that you have the essential skills and knowledge to get started. And as I mentioned, of course, you're free to explore the other features here available, and I'll make sure to include those resources in my follow-up email as well. And speaking of resources, this is a perfect segue into showing you where to find resources on our website as well, and where to find support. So if you head to spacesedu.com, you'll see resources on the top here. And I would recommend bookmarking the Help Center and also the All Resources website over here. The Help Center is the place for any articles pertaining to more like technical knowledge. And you can even start a conversation here, a chat with our team members. In fact, this chat box should be visible in your accounts, in your SpacesEDU accounts as well. As for the resources website, this is equipped with so much knowledge and so much information. I would recommend particularly the 15 strategies to support inclusion using SpacesEDU. There's also really great guides here we can filter through. And the number one guide I would recommend is, of course, the teacher guide to getting started if this is your first time. We also have SpacesEDU for K-3 classrooms with specific time-saving solutions and tips for K-3 teachers. And when it comes to implementation ideas, we also have a section for that. And that would include anything pertaining to assessment, but also integration ideas for middle and high school. And another great category here to browse through is the video tutorials. So our platform is constantly evolving. So with every new release, we make sure that the video tutorials are up to date. And this is the place where you would go to actually learn about the new cool features or enhancements that we're making on the tool here. So the video tutorials are definitely ideal for first-time users. So you could watch the video tutorials as you're exploring your account at the same time. So feel free to look through all of this information. Definitely bookmark both websites as I mentioned here. All right, let's go back to the presentation. Well, it seems to be frozen. Well, that's too bad. All right, well, in that case, I'm just going to leave it right here and provide you with the SpacesEDU tech support team email in the chat. But you should expect an email from me by end of this week with the recording, with any relevant resources. I'm also going to include a survey that I would love for you to participate in just to give your first impressions of the platform, of the webinar as well. And you'll be entered in a draw to win a $25 gift card from Starbucks. I do want to thank you so much for joining me this evening or this afternoon, wherever you're joining me from. I appreciate your time, and I hope to see you soon in future webinars as well. Thank you so much.